Stop what you're doing and imagine this. A 6-year-old boy, standing all alone at a busy highway rest stop, clutching his backpack, whispering, "My mom forgot me." No one notices. No one stops. And at that very moment, his whole world feels cold, empty, and terrifying. But here's the twist. You won't believe what happens next. Before we dive in, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable stories you have to see to believe. Marcus was just a small black boy, barely 6 years old, with tiny hands gripping the straps of a backpack that seemed almost too big for him. The sun was just rising, painting the rest stop in golden light, but nothing could warm the fear in his chest. Cars rushed by, people chatting, coffee in hand, paying no attention to the little boy standing frozen near the vending machines. He didn't cry out loud or scream. He just whispered again and again, the same haunting words, "My mom forgot me." Each passing second stretched longer than the last. Every engine roar made him hope someone would stop, but hope turned into disappointment every single time. Meanwhile, about 300 miles away, James, a billionaire known for his businesses and luxurious lifestyle, was driving in his black SUV. Most people only saw the wealth, the fame, the power, but James was more than that. He had grown up poor, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts just to put food on the table. Memories of that childhood, of feeling small in a big world, flooded his mind that morning. He felt a strange emptiness, a reminder that no amount of money could replace human connection. Fate, it seems, had other plans. James stopped at the same rest area to grab a quick coffee. That's when he saw Marcus. Something about the boy, standing there alone, scared, repeating those words, made James freeze. He knelt down to meet him at eye level and asked gently, "Hey there, buddy, are you okay?" Marcus looked up with wide eyes, voice trembling. "My mom forgot me." In that moment, James didn't see a stranger. He saw a scared child who needed someone to stand beside him, and he knew he couldn't walk away. He offered Marcus a bottle of juice, asked his name, and listened carefully. "Marcus," the boy said. "I'm James," he replied simply, leaving out the wealth, the fame, the titles. Nothing mattered except that this little boy was safe. When the highway patrol arrived, it became clear that Marcus had been left behind for hours. No panicked parent, no phone calls, just a little boy alone, waiting, scared. James stayed by his side, telling funny stories about getting lost as a kid, making Marcus laugh, giving him a sense of normalcy in a moment that felt anything but normal. Then came the moment that would change everything. When the officers mentioned the direction Marcus's family likely traveled, James didn't hesitate. "I'll help. We'll drive and find her," he said. Marcus's eyes lit up with hope, the first real hope he'd felt all day. As they drove down the highway together, mile after mile, James felt a sense of purpose money could never buy. Somewhere far ahead, a mother was driving, unaware that her child had been left behind, about to realize the most precious thing in her life was missing. And little Marcus? For the first time in hours, he felt safe again. As James drove, the highway stretched endlessly ahead, lined with fields, forests, and the occasional gas station. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, quiet at first, staring out the window. Every rumble of a passing truck made him jump. Every honk of a horn made his heart race. He didn't know what to say. The fear was still there, lingering under his small frame, but with James beside him, it felt a little lighter. James glanced at him, noticing the way Marcus's fingers twisted together nervously. He knew he had to keep talking, had to distract him, had to make the boy believe that everything was going to be okay. "So," James said softly, "have you ever been on a really long road trip before?" Marcus shook his head. James smiled, pointing out small things along the highway. Fields of corn swaying in the wind, a red barn in the distance, a family of deer crossing carefully behind a guardrail. Slowly, Marcus began to relax, a little smile creeping onto his face. He even laughed when James tried to imitate the sound of a police siren, complete with exaggerated wobbly voice. It wasn't much, but it was enough to let the fear loosen its grip for a moment. Meanwhile, somewhere ahead, Marcus's mother, Tanya, was beginning to realize the nightmare no parent ever wants to face. She had stopped at a gas station a few miles back, thinking Marcus was safely in the car, only to turn around and see the back seat empty. Panic set in immediately. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles went white. Every second felt like an hour. She called her husband, her sister, anyone she could think of, her voice trembling as she described what had happened. And yet, the miles between them seemed impossible, the thought of finding her child almost unbearable. Back in the SUV, James checked the GPS and then called the highway patrol to update them. They had a general direction, but it was a race against time. Every minute mattered. Marcus, sensing the urgency in James's voice, grew quiet, his small hand resting against the window. James noticed and reached over to give it a reassuring squeeze. "We're going to find your mom, Marcus," he said firmly. "I promise we're not stopping until we do." The boy nodded, the weight of fear still there, but softened by trust. As the miles passed, James shared stories about his own childhood, about getting lost at amusement parks, about walking home in the rain after missing the school bus. He wanted Marcus to know that sometimes, even when it feels like the world has forgotten you, there are people willing to step in. Slowly, a bond began to form, fragile but real, a connection that neither money nor fame could ever create. Marcus began to open up, telling James about his favorite cartoons, his love for dinosaurs, and even the small joke his mom always made that never failed to make him giggle. The sun climbed higher, and with it came a new kind of anxiety. Would they reach her in time? Would Marcus recognize her when they found her? James felt the tension building in his chest. He could see it in Marcus's eyes, the mixture of hope and fear, the worry that maybe no one was coming, that maybe he was truly alone. He spoke softly, trying to soothe that anxiety. "Sometimes moms make mistakes," he said, "but they always love you, and today, we're going to fix this mistake together." Marcus clung to that, nodding, whispering, "Okay." Then, finally, a call came in from the highway patrol. They had located a car matching the description of Marcus's family vehicle a few miles ahead, stuck in traffic. James's heart raced. He pressed gently on the accelerator, careful but determined, knowing that every second counted. Marcus leaned forward, peering out the windshield, scanning every passing car, hoping, praying, that his mom would be there. And then, in the middle of a crowded rest stop exit, Marcus saw her, a woman running toward the SUV, arms outstretched, tears streaming down her face. "Mom!" Marcus shouted, his voice breaking, his body tensing as he leapt from the seat. James pulled over and watched silently, the emotions of the moment washing over him. Tanya scooped Marcus into her arms, holding him tighter than she ever had, apologizing between sobs, promising it would never happen again. Marcus buried his face in her shoulder, feeling the world right itself in a single embrace. James stayed back, giving them the space they needed, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, a deep, unshakable satisfaction. It wasn't about the money, the fame, or the headlines. It was about doing the right thing, about being there when someone needed you most. As mother and son held each other, James knew that this day, this road trip, had changed him just as much as it had changed Marcus. And somewhere in that crowded parking lot, amidst the chaos and relief, a small boy learned that even when it feels like the world has forgotten you, kindness can arrive from the most unexpected places, and sometimes it comes from a billionaire willing to drive 300 miles just to make sure a child is safe. Even after Marcus was safely back in his mother's arms, the world didn't instantly feel perfect. Tanya held him tightly, rocking back and forth, whispering apologies over and over. Her voice trembled, the words choking in her throat. "I'm so sorry, baby. I should have watched you. I should have." Marcus, still small but wise beyond his years in that moment, looked up at her and whispered, "It's okay, Mom. I'm here now." But Tanya couldn't shake the guilt. Every parent's worst nightmare had just happened, and even though her son was safe, the fear lingered like a shadow over the rest stop. James stood a few steps away, silent, watching the reunion unfold. He didn't need anyone to thank him. The moment itself was reward enough. Still, Tanya noticed him, the stranger who had stayed by her son's side for hours, who had driven across states to reunite them. She rushed over, her tears still flowing. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you," she said, voice trembling. James shook his head. "No thanks needed," he said simply. "Marcus is safe, and that's all that matters." Marcus looked at James, a shy smile breaking through. "Thanks," he whispered. In that moment, A connection had been forged, one of trust, kindness, and courage that neither money nor power could ever buy. James knelt to Marcus's level, giving him a fist bump, a small gesture that made the boy giggle. Even in the chaos, the moment held something magical. A stranger had stepped into his life at the exact moment he needed help most. As Tanya called the highway patrol to explain everything, Marcus clung to her hand, still glancing at James. Questions tumbled from him in a rush. How did you find me? How did you know where to go? James smiled, remembering the hours on the road, the worry, the determination. Sometimes, you just follow your heart, he said simply. Marcus didn't fully understand, but he felt it, the bravery and kindness that had saved him. Later, as they sat together at the rest stop, Tanya finally began to calm down. She looked at Marcus, at James, and realized something profound. Life had a strange way of teaching lessons when we least expected it. The fear, the panic, and the despair could be overwhelming, but hope could arrive in the form of a stranger who chose to act. For Marcus, James had become more than a helper. He had become a hero, a figure who reminded him that even in the scariest moments, someone could show up and change everything. James knew he couldn't stay long. His life was complicated, full of meetings and obligations. But the memory of Marcus's eyes, the relief and joy in Tanya's face, would stay with him forever. As he prepared to leave, Marcus tugged gently at his sleeve. "Will I see you again?" he asked. James knelt once more. "Maybe," he said, smiling. "But remember, the courage and bravery inside you, that's always with you. And that's what really matters." Driving away, James reflected on the day. The sun was setting now, painting the highway in shades of orange and pink. It had been a long day, one filled with fear, hope, and action. And in the middle of it all, he had been reminded that even the smallest decisions, like stopping to help a scared little boy, could ripple far beyond what anyone imagined. The world wasn't always kind, but moments like this proved it could be. Back in the SUV, James thought about his own childhood, the moments when someone had gone out of their way to help him, to protect him, to simply be there. It wasn't about money or power, it was about presence, about caring. And now, Marcus had experienced that too. Somewhere along the long, lonely highways, a bond had formed, fragile but powerful, and it would shape the lives of both of them forever. That night, as Marcus finally fell asleep in his bed, he dreamed not of fear or being left behind, but of roads stretching wide and open, of strangers who became heroes, and of the idea that the world could be a place full of unexpected kindness. And somewhere miles away, James rested too, knowing that for one small boy, life had changed forever, and that sometimes the simplest acts of humanity leave the deepest marks. The next morning, the story of Marcus being left behind had already begun to ripple far beyond the quiet rest stop. Tanya couldn't stop replaying every second in her mind. The moment she realized her son was gone, the panic that had gripped her chest, and the overwhelming relief when she saw James arrive like an answer to a desperate prayer. Even now, hours later, sitting at the kitchen table with Marcus tucked safely beside her, she felt an ache she couldn't shake. How could she have let this happen? How close had she come to a nightmare she never wanted to face? But Marcus, ever resilient, seemed to understand in his own way. He was quieter than usual, thinking about the events of the day, the stranger who had crossed hundreds of miles to make sure he was safe. Tanya watched him, realizing that despite the fear, her son had learned something invaluable, that sometimes the world could surprise you, that help could come from places you never expected, and that courage wasn't just about adults. It could exist in children too. By mid-morning, news crews began arriving at Tanya's neighborhood. Videos of James kneeling beside Marcus, the boy clutching his backpack, were already circulating on social media, going viral. Headlines shouted, "Billionaire drives 300 miles to rescue lost boy." People were fascinated, amazed, and inspired by the act. Comments poured in from all over the country, strangers expressing disbelief, gratitude, and hope. Some shared their own stories of being helped by someone unexpected, while others marveled at the idea that a man with so much could stop everything just to help a child. Tanya struggled with a mix of emotions, pride, relief, and embarrassment. She had made a mistake, but now she saw the bigger picture. Marcus was safe, and the world, at least in one small but shining example, had shown her that kindness still existed in abundance. She watched Marcus scroll through the videos on a tablet, pointing excitedly at the man who had saved him. "That's him, Mom. That's James," Marcus shouted. Tanya smiled, grateful, but her mind kept circling back to how much of a difference one person's actions could make. Meanwhile, James returned to his life, but something had shifted within him. That day, driving 300 miles to help a scared child had reminded him of the most important truths he'd learned in his own childhood. That empathy mattered more than money, that presence mattered more than fame, and that courage could appear in moments when it was least expected. Sitting in his luxurious office later that day, he reflected on the world he had built, successful, powerful, admired, but realized the moment he would remember most vividly wasn't a business deal or a financial victory. It was Marcus's small hand in his, the boy's trembling voice whispering fear, and the hope that had lit up when James promised, "We're going to find your mom." The story began to spread nationwide. News outlets highlighted not only the act of bravery, but also the emotional resonance. A small boy abandoned for hours, a mother terrified, and a billionaire who chose humanity over everything else. Social media erupted with messages like, "This gives me hope in humanity," and "If we all acted like James, the world would be a better place." Marcus's story became a symbol, a reminder that ordinary acts of courage and kindness, even from unexpected people, could change lives forever. For Tanya, the days that followed were filled with reflection. She spent time with Marcus, talking to him about what happened, about safety, about trust, and about how sometimes mistakes could lead to lessons that shaped lives in powerful ways. Marcus, for his part, seemed to understand more than she expected. He would occasionally hug James when the story appeared on TV, even if it was from afar, saying, "He saved me, Mom. He really saved me." And Tanya, looking at her son, knew that the world had shown her something vital. There were people willing to step in, to care, and to act when it mattered most. Meanwhile, James quietly observed the attention from afar. He didn't seek fame or recognition, but he couldn't deny the ripple effect of what had happened. Messages poured in from people inspired by his action, strangers who had been moved to tears, parents who now felt hope for their own children. It was a reminder that even one decision, one choice to help someone in need, could reach far beyond the moment itself. He realized that heroism wasn't always about grand gestures, awards, or media attention. Sometimes it was simple, showing up when someone needed you most. And in the quiet moments, when the world seemed to slow down, James thought about Marcus, about how a little boy's fear had turned into hope, about how a child's trust could teach an adult more about courage, empathy, and humanity than any boardroom or balance sheet ever could. The day had changed him as much as it had changed Marcus, leaving him with a profound understanding that the smallest acts of kindness often leave the largest marks on the world. Days turned into weeks, but the story of Marcus and James didn't fade, it grew. Social media posts kept resurfacing, news articles highlighted the unlikely hero, and people everywhere shared their own stories of kindness inspired by what had happened. Marcus, once a scared little boy alone at a rest stop, had become a symbol of hope. His laughter returned, brighter than ever, and he clung to his mother's hand a little tighter, appreciating every moment of safety and love. Tanya, meanwhile, learned something she would carry forever. Mistakes happened, but they didn't define her as a parent. What mattered was how you responded, how you fixed them, and how you held your children close when fear struck. She often told Marcus, "You were brave, and you trusted the right person when it mattered most." Marcus smiled at her words, remembering the quiet kindness of James, the stranger who had driven 300 miles to make sure he was safe. That act became a story they shared often, a reminder that even in moments of fear, humanity could shine brilliantly. James, back in his life of boardrooms and business deals, found himself thinking about Marcus more often than he expected. He realized that this one decision, the choice to stop, to care, to drive hundreds of miles, was more meaningful than any deal or headline. It reminded him why he had worked so hard, not for the wealth or fame, but to have the means to make a difference. He had always believed that success was measured in numbers, but now he understood. Real success was measured in the lives you touched, the people you helped, and the hope you gave. One evening, weeks after the reunion, James received a simple letter. Marcus had drawn it himself, colorful crayons spelling out the words carefully. Thank you for saving me. You are my hero. Love, Marcus. James smiled, feeling a warmth that no luxury or accolade could ever give. He pinned the drawing on his office wall, a daily reminder that the smallest acts of courage could leave the deepest marks. The story spread across the nation, inspiring countless people. Parents who had faced their own fears reached out to comfort their children differently. Strangers became more willing to step in when help was needed, and communities realized that heroes don't always wear capes. They show up when the world feels its coldest. And Marcus? He never forgot the man who had treated him not as a statistic, not as a news story, but as a real child in need of protection and care. For Tanya, every hug and every whispered, "I love you," for Marcus became a celebration of life and second chances. She would often tell him, "The world can be scary, but there are people who make it better. Always remember that." Marcus listened, understanding more deeply than most children could, because he had lived it. He had experienced fear, loneliness, and uncertainty, and then he had felt safety, courage, and hope, all delivered by a stranger who believed that helping one child was worth everything. James, too, carried the memory forward. That day at the rest stop, watching Marcus's fear turn into joy, watching a mother's despair turn into relief, it reminded him that life's greatest wealth isn't money or power. It's love, kindness, and the courage to act. And sometimes, the smallest choices, like stopping for a child, listening, and offering help, create stories that inspire millions. As the sun set over the city weeks later, James thought back to the highway, the miles he had driven, and the small boy clutching his backpack with wide, frightened eyes. He smiled quietly. That day, a little boy learned to trust, a mother learned forgiveness, and a man learned that real heroism isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in heart. And somewhere, in that quiet space between fear and hope, the world had shifted just a little bit for the better. For everyone who heard the story, the lesson was clear. Courage can be quiet, kindness can be simple, and humanity can arrive when you least expect it. Marcus's story became more than a viral moment. It became a testament to what happens when people care enough to act. And it started with a billionaire willing to drive 300 miles to ensure a little boy knew, without a doubt, that he was never truly alone. The world watched, hearts full, inspired, and reminded that heroes come in many forms. And sometimes, they appear exactly when they are needed most.